Sun Microsystems exploded onto the Silicon Valley scene with an incredible business model and astounding growth. Sun eventually became one of the Valley's most important and iconic companies, worth some $140 billion at its peak. But over time, that brilliant sun burnt itself into a husk. The company's decline was long and painful. In this video, we take a look at the dawn and dusk of one of Silicon Valley's computing pioneers, Sun Microsystems. In 1978, a Stanford student from Germany named Andreas Andy Bechtolsheim becomes a no-fee consultant for the Xerox PARC Research Laboratory. There he sees the most amazing thing, a bunch of Alto computers networked together. At the time, chip designs were starting to be done on computer, but designers did not have individual computers powerful enough to run those softwares. Andy comes to the belief that what PARC had, powerful personal computers like the Alto, would work far better. And since Xerox had no interest in commercializing PARC's work, he can build his own version at Stanford. So, in 1981, he joins this project to build low-cost personal workstations for computer-aided design or CAD work. The hardware was based on the Motorola 68000 chip, the first commercially available 32-bit microprocessor. The project and that first workstation computer was named Sun, which stands for the Stanford University Network. Notably, the Sun 1 workstation computer had a bitmap display like the Alto and an Ethernet connection for networking. A few years later, it would run an older version of Unix System 3. By 1981, Andy and the team were making a good number of these computers, printing custom circuit boards in Margaret Jack's Hall. Unfortunately, Stanford ended the project when it started to gather some real commercial traction. Andy's first action after this was to license out the Sun hardware design. He found a few customers, charging them $10,000 each. However, these licensees did not want to build the powerful and personal workstation that Andy really wanted to do. If you want something done right, well, then you have to go do it yourself. But first, you need to put together a crew. A secretary connected Bechtolsheim with another fellow Stanford alum, a recent MBA grad and serial entrepreneur named Vinod Khosla. Khosla had once worked at a company called Daisy Systems, a pioneer in the electronic design automation or EDA market. The company eventually failed, and one of the reasons why had been the lack of sufficient hardware. Khosla grasped that these workstations could meet that need. He and Bechtolsheim wrote out a 6-page business plan, laying out the strategy of building and selling Sun workstations at a price range between $25,000 and $100,000 each. That is about $75,000 to $300,000 in 2022 dollars. Sun recruited 2 more co-founders. Khosla had a very good friend named Scott McNealy, a Harvard grad with whom he had previously worked on a failed startup called DataDump. 6 months later, Bill Joy, then a grad student at UC Berkeley, joined as a full co-founder working on software product design. Joy was then known for working on the Berkeley software distribution of the Unix operating system. McNealy reached out to 2 venture capitalists, UC Ventures and West Coast Ventures. He showed them the workstation and quickly got some funding. Later on, Kleiner Perkins and August Capital joined in as well. Sun Microsystems opened its doors in February 1982. Khosla served as CEO, McNealy was VP of Manufacturing, Bechtolsheim in hardware product design, with Joy joining him later on the software side. The workstation is a bit of an interesting product category. Back then, if someone needed computing power, like for CAD work, they had to reserve time on a larger, more powerful computer, the mini-computer. They communicated with these mini-computers through something like a VT50 computer terminal. This somewhat ironically named mini-computer is called Mini because it was smaller, cheaper, and less powerful than a mainframe computer from IBM. But it still cost over $25,000 at the time, or about $190,000 today. What Sun first envisioned and sold back in those days was more like a high-end desktop computer, more like a Mac Studio or a Mac Pro perhaps. The workstation has more power than your average low-grade consumer computer, enough power to run these complicated CAD softwares. However, it was also affordable enough for the average prosumer to own on their own. Sun Microsystems had orders before the company even started. People at universities and research institutions had heard of the Sun project at Stanford and put in pre-orders. Interest really surged when they heard that Bill Joy joined and that the workstation would, eventually, run the Berkeley Unix operating system. The team worked tirelessly to design and ship their new workstations. Their first workstation had only 256 kilobytes of memory and sold for about $8,000 to $10,000 at 50% gross margin. The Sun 2, with better specs and Berkeley Unix installed, followed later that year. There were other workstation makers at the time. Sun's main competitor was Apollo Computer. Apollo had started a year before Sun and was their main competitor. The EDA and CAD companies also made their own hardware. Sun's advantage was that they leveraged open and available resources. Their first workstations were made from off-the-shelf parts, standard power supplies, Motorola microprocessors, and Fujitsu disk drives. For software, an off-the-shelf operating system, Berkeley Unix. This later turned into Sun OS, a Unix OS, which after that became Solaris. For networking, they used TCP/IP, which had been recently declared the standard for all military computer networking. Networking in particular had been important, as it allowed users to collaborate from their own spaces. Through its open business model, Sun produced really good, widely adopted technology. The vision of selling standardized, widely compatible computers caught fire. One workstation for each user. People loved it. Sun opened its doors in February 1982. They became profitable by May, ultimately generating $8.5 million in its first fiscal year. The fiscal year after that, Sun grew to $39 million. The year after that, $115 million. Managing all that growth, however, proved to be a bigger challenge. It was a bunch of 27-year-olds running the place, and there were growing pains. The board wanted Sun to recruit some more experience, so they recruited the 42-year-old Owen Brown. But Brown clashed with Khosla and quickly left. Scott McNealy took over as interim CEO. Despite being so young, he ran the company well, and eventually the board decided to have him remain as the company's leader. Khosla left Sun the next year in 1985, joining John Doerr at Kleiner Perkins. There he would make incredible investments like Juniper Networks, which returned 2,500 times its investment. Today he runs his own firm, Khosla Ventures. Every 6 months from 1982 to 1987, Sun doubled the number of workstations it shipped. In 1985, they launched their Sun 3 workstation series. Featuring an upgraded Motorola processor, the Motorola MC68020, Sun 3 introduced a brand new Distributed File System standard, Network File System, or NFS. Sun licensed the NFS code to others for a nominal fee, turning NFS into a widely adopted standard. The Sun 3 was an immediate success, accounting for a third of total sales in the quarter after its release in September 1985. Sun had to open a new factory in nearby Milpitas to handle all the new orders. By 1987, Sun had eclipsed its once biggest competitor, Apollo Computer. Creator of the personal workstation market, Apollo did have better hardware, but customers chose Sun's cheaper computers. The Sun 3 was 15% cheaper than anything Apollo had. Apollo would eventually be acquired by Hewlett-Packard in April 1989 and soon thereafter shut down. In March 1986, Sun IPO with $210 million in revenue. They raised $45 million, the biggest tech IPO in 3 years. In their first annual report, it says, "Our rejection of proprietary systems in order to concentrate on our model of distributed computing, technology standards, and high quality is itself an innovation. And, in a very real sense, this is Sun's proprietary product." From 1986 to 1988, Sun's revenues quintupled, from $210 million to $1.1 billion. The company was moving fast on all cylinders, but soon developed a problem. Over time, it soon became clear that one of the company's critical partners was not keeping up, and that was Motorola, the company that provided Sun's microprocessors. They had just one design team and could not keep up with Sun's demands. One memory bug took them 2 years to fix. It took them just as long to go from 10 MHz to 12. Sun tested an Intel-compatible workstation which did not go very well, after which Bill Joy came up with the idea of designing their own microprocessor using a thing that IBM recently wrote about called a RISC architecture. The key point about RISC is that each instruction performs just one function. IBM claims in their writings that this could potentially speed things 4 times over. So in 1987, the team, led by Anant Agrawal, finalized the SPARC CPU, fabbed by Fujitsu. It was indeed much faster than what others can offer, and eventually it would be used in Sun's next big workstations, the Sun 4 or SPARC Station series, released in 1989. Sun makes the majority of their money selling systems. They leveraged open, off-the-shelf parts to create cheap, high-powered workstations for specific technical applications in government, corporate, or Wall Street. But what did open mean? Encouraged by their success with NFS, in 1987 Sun partnered with 20% investor AT&T to collaborate on Unix. Over the years, the Unix tree had gotten complicated, and Sun wanted to unify this gnarled tree. Sun envisioned a new unified Unix has the pathway out of workstations into the broader consumer market. However, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, and other Unix licensees rebelled. Fearing what Sun and AT&T might do with Unix, they created the Open Software Foundation, or OSF. OSF, McNeely calls them the opposed Sun Forever Foundation, started signing up vendors and developers under the banner of being truly open, with no single company in charge. Sun and AT&T formed their own competing organization, Unix International, and signed up companies like Toshiba and Motorola and others. The Unix Wars, as it was called, had long-lasting effects on both Sun and its competitors. It crippled Sun's microprocessor strategy. Sun would try to license its RISC-based SPARC chip designs to other companies, but insisted on retaining control over the IP. Preventing any fork killed any chance of SPARC's widespread adoption. A few years later, in the United Kingdom, another company selling RISC designs, Advanced RISC Machines Limited, or ARM, would be founded. When it comes to software, the war stalled technical progress on Unix itself and divided its community. Neither side really produced a competitive commercial product, though the Sun and AT&T collaboration would eventually produce the Solaris operating system. Anyway, the wars opened the door for a new competitor, Microsoft. In 1993, Microsoft released Windows NT 3.1, an operating system produced for workstations and server computers. NT took parts from Unix, IBM, and others to create this single, business-oriented operating system that was 32-bit and had networking and file sharing for multi-user collaboration. It was the right product at the right time. Unix was distracted, and some parts of it sat in dubious legal territory. Linux, an open-source Unix-like operating system with a big role to play down the line, was not yet desktop-ready. Apple and the Mac was post-Jobs and had no idea what they were doing. To a lot of businesses, Microsoft was the only game in town. Sun's competitors like IBM and HP rapidly started adopting Windows NT for their own workstations. Sun, for their part, felt that Unix was a far better product and refused to adopt Windows. However, it soon became clear that Windows NT and Windows 95 after it, combined with Intel's rapid improvements in CPU performance, were eating into Sun's original workstation market. So, throughout the 1990s, Sun switched to a more vertically integrated business strategy, selling complete systems centered on SPARC for the hardware and Solaris for the software. As Microsoft and Intel increasingly encroach on the high-end workstation market, Sun moved upwards into the enterprise server market. In 1996, Sun acquired Cray Business Systems from the famous supercomputer maker. Cray had adopted the SPARC and Solaris technologies to enter the commercial business market, but had failed to make a splash. Sun snapped up the division for $15 million. As it turned out, Sun's vertically integrated stack, from networking to processor to operating system, was perfect for the server market. Solaris is known for its symmetric multiprocessing capabilities, which means you can add a large number of SPARC processors to the system for easy scaling without much latency. Windows and Intel, on the other hand, can handle just 4 to 8. So Intel might make a far faster individual processor than Sun can, but Sun servers can still perform better on a system basis because you can add in up to 100 processors. As the internet started to become a thing in the 1990s, this web-connected server market grew to become even larger than Sun's old workstation business. Being in the internet server business, however, turned out to be a double-edged sword for Sun. eBay, Yahoo, Dell, Bloomberg, Merrill Lynch, and even Microsoft adopted Sun enterprise servers for their web operations. The company grew revenues 50 to 60% each year. Things were good. Then the internet bubble popped and sliced that multi-billion-dollar business by nearly half. Thousands of Sun Systems units were being resold on the secondary market at fire sale prices. Management struggled through several unprofitable years. They made $1.85 billion and $927 million profit in 2000 and 2001, then lost $587 million in 2002, and then $3.4 billion in 2003. Good times. R&D costs remained persistently high due to Sun's need to support technology ecosystems like Spark, Solaris, and Java, their popular programming language. Java alone required 4,000 developers a year. Then came open source. For a long time, Sun used the open verbiage. Compared to its entirely proprietary competitors in the 1970s, yeah, sure, Sun was open. But it was not truly open in the way we might think about it now. For instance, until 2005, you cannot download and look at the Solaris source code. You needed to sign a contract, and even then, they would not let you see all of the source code. And we already talked about some of the issues they had with Spark. Frustration with these practices would give rise to the grassroots open source movement personified by Linux. For a long time throughout the 1990s, Linux was a hobbyist's toy. Then suddenly, people realized that it had gotten good enough to be used in real business-critical production environments. Businesses and organizations found that they can scale up by creating clusters of Linux servers, all of them the same with commodity hardware. Widespread Linux adoption annihilated Sun's enterprise server business, and with that, the company had no more tricks up their sleeve. Throughout the 2000s, the company attempted to get back to their open roots by open sourcing their technology. They acquired various technologies like the database MySQL and data storage company StorageTech, paying too much for something that made nothing. But with the global financial crisis roiling the industry, investors got tired of the endless losses, and a good offer came along. In 2009, Oracle bought Sun for $7.4 billion. From 2000 to then, Sun had lost over $10 billion of revenue and over 90% of its stock value. The company has since been digested and its products rebranded. Sun was a brash company. They were known for sharp elbows and not playing very nicely with their competitors. And when they were the Uber of the 1980s and 1990s, growing 30, 40, 50% a year, that was fine. But this attitude eventually got to them as technology trends changed around them. Sun refused to change, sign on, or collaborate, and in the end they became this lonely outpost of technology far from the leading edge. It would be interesting to contrast this attitude with Microsoft before and after Satya Nadella became its CEO. And Nadella had in fact worked for Sun before joining Microsoft in 1992. I wonder if watching what happened at Sun helped shape his attitudes in Microsoft's subsequent turnaround. Alright everyone, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, sign up for the newsletter, and I'll see you guys next time.